All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Eat and Greet, where hopefully in the next hour or so we're going to spend together. We're going to give you something that is worth the time you took to show up. And I most certainly think that we will, because not only do we have a really cool topic to just kind of sit and eat and be together with today, there's activity. And I really love when there's an activity, something we can bring in and allow the process of exploring astrology to become really, really real. So our beautiful guest Fern has done that for us. And Fern, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Stormie, for having me. I'm really excited to share this with you and your audience today.
And it's really kind of neat because, again, I mean, I know I have a YouTube channel, so I'm obviously very excited about technology, but it is technology that brought us together as well. We met through a summit we did together.
That's right. Yeah, I was really so honored to be part of the Astrological Awakening, Astrology of Awakening Summit. That's it. Yes.
Yeah, with Christina Caudell, and it was really a very neat experience and such a cool way to bring people together who maybe would not have met at all. You know, we could have completely missed each other, and here we are.
Yeah, it was really a special experience.
Okay. All right, Fern. So I ask every one of my guests when they come, how did you get into astrology? Because we all have such interesting stories as to how it happened for us. So how did you get into Astrology Island?
Okay, so I got into astrology pretty early when I was probably 5 or 6, and my grandfather told me that we were both Virgos, and I was like, what's a Virgo, you know? And as I got older, I found astrology books in my grandparents' house when I would go visit, like Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, you know, that's a crowd favorite. And then later, when I was in college, I got my first official astrology reading, and I was blown away. And then I met a mentor, Asata Gabrielle, and she was an incredible woman, an artist, an astrologer, a channeler, a flower essence practitioner, and an herbalist. And she basically mentored me and friended me until she died about 5 years ago.
Wow. And so you've kind of had it, you've been wrapped in it since early on.
Yes, pretty early. I'm 51 now, and I've been basically really deep into it for the last 30 years. So, but even before that was part of the astrological world.
Absolutely. And so for you, when did the transition happen from just kind of studying and having it in your life to giving it away to other people as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm a Virgo, and so and I've got Mercury in Virgo. I've got a few planets in Virgo, and I really like to do things right. So it took me a really long time, probably say maybe 15 years. I really started to do it professionally about 15 years ago, when people began to ask me, you know, can I pay you for a reading? And I was like, okay, you know, I guess I'm ready finally.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm a Virgo rising and I laugh all the time. I'm like, look, you have no idea what a miracle it is that I make content at all, because it's never right. You know what I mean? And so it is an evolution for me to actually do interviews and put content out, is like that evolved sacredness of imperfection of my Virgo rising.
I can totally relate.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, and so it was neat to kind of come around and meet and decide on the topic we wanted to cover, because there's so much to get into. And I love the way that you've titled it archaeological astrology. Like that to me is profound, because there's so much when we dig and we get into it and we have a deeper understanding, and then we can look at cycles in our lives. It's like you don't have to know 5,000 asteroids. You can use what's right in front of you and really get into that. So I'm really thrilled to share what you have with the guests today.
Me too. So I'm going to go ahead and put up the slideshow that I have for you. And part of where this topic came about is because I, you know, as as someone who was an astrologer for myself and my friends and family for a long time before I started working with clients, I would often kind of freak myself out about my transits. And I'd see, I saw other people or young astrologers kind of scaring themselves with the transit coming up. You look 10 years into the future and, oh my God, Pluto is going to be opposing my Venus. What's going to happen? And so I found it really healing to kind of go backwards in time and look at both famous people's charts and also my own, and look at similar transits and be like, oh, it really actually wasn't so bad after all. And sometimes it was really actually good. So it to me, it was kind of a self-soothing process to begin with this type of work.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you said that, because there is this principle that I carry for sure, that where it's like, look, we've survived 100% of our lives so far, and that's really important to remember, is that the things that these transits have been in play, whether we knew about them, until we knew about them, and we're here. Whatever it looks like, we are here. So you can go back and see that we can do hard things. We can do joyous things. We can work with these transits. It's really kind of neat to see that we've already done it, usually.
Absolutely. And one thing I always like to remind people when I work with clients in this way or teach my students is this quote that I love by Mark Twain, which is, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Mm-hmm. So I tell people, when you're having, your next Saturn to Venus transit or Saturn to your sun, it's not going to be exactly like it was before, but there are going to be some repetitions of maybe the themes or the energetic, but how you work with it is going to be completely different.
Absolutely.
So
beautiful. I just love your slides. I love everybody's slides. I just feel like people come and I get lost and almost mystified in the presentation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want me to share a little bit about what my perception of archaeological astrology is?
Absolutely. Yes. Share with us, because this may be a completely new concept to someone who's who's been here for a while. So yeah, tell us about that.
Okay, great. And this is something that I think every astrologer uses and does. It's not something that I made up or created. I gave it, this name, which I have Venus in Cancer, so I love the past. I love to research the past. I'm actually doing this talk with you right now from an antique store that our friend owns. So I'm surrounded by the past a lot. So I coined this term for a process that a lot of astrologers do use. And what it means to me, though, is drawing on your astrological past to inform your astrological present and future. And the question that I bring to it is, working with this Mark Twain quote, how can you shape the rhyme of your astrological transits?
That is beautiful. That is beautiful.
All right. So the planets that I work with when I'm doing the excavation of a chart in this way are the outer planets, but also Jupiter and Saturn, which aren't technically considered outer planets or, technically considered the social planet. But because Jupiter has a much quicker cycle, moves every 12 years, it makes a return to the place that it was before. We have a Jupiter return, so to speak. It's an easier planet to work with if you're younger. So if you're 24 and you want to do some of this work and see, oh, where was Jupiter 12 years ago and how did that show up for me then? And then look at where it is now, it's more accessible to work with. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, those transits are going to, be much slower. They're further out and they take longer to cycle through our chart. But those planets are going to be more impactful and probably bring much more sort of initiatory experiences into our lives.
Absolutely. And it's so neat. I do love with younger people to talk about their Jupiter returns and their Jupiter cycles, because they are so identifiable. And I don't know about your experience, but every time I'm in a Jupiter phasing, it is very Jupiterian. Like it just gets big. like I just get big in some way. It just, of course, you know, what's the difference in the rhyme, but the action is always the same. So it's neat to be able to see those right away.
Absolutely. It's much more magnified. You know, Jupiter, you can really see what's happening. So we've got the amplification and the expansion with Jupiter, and then the contraction and narrowing with Saturn. And I'm just going to go through each of these planets because in order to do archaeological astrology, it's really helpful and important to have a sense of the personality or the character of the planet. So for folks who are watching this who may not have as much familiarity, I want to just give an overview of the planet before we dive into, we're going to look at Maya Angelou's chart and look at how some transits played out in her life. And then I'm going to offer up an activity that people can do, you know, now or later as they watch this.
Yes, and there's a new moon activity in there, and we'll be coming right along to this new moon in Leo in just a couple weeks. So you have time, you guys, to grab it, to bring this in and put it in a little bit of your ritual.
Great. All right. So Jupiter is ruled by Sagittarius in modern astrology and Pisces in the traditional. It has a 12-year cycle. Some of the gods that are associated with Jupiter are Zeus, Indra, and Shalak, the Mayan god. And Jupiter, as many of us know, it has to do with travel, jokes or sense of humor, faith, expansion, growth, confidence, knowledge, luck, generosity, and adventure. In the body, it rules over the liver. And I like to associate, you know, again, in being a Virgo, I'm really attuned to nature. So I really think about each planet as in terms of geography. So I think of Jupiter as having to do with vast landscapes and deep canyons. And now we think of Jupiter sometimes as a good planet, you know, and Saturn is a bad planet, but I've seen people have challenging experiences in Jupiter transit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm like, look, this is all very circumstantial, you know, you cannot just write off bad credit to Saturn. I've had phenomenal Saturn transits where I'm like, wow, and some rough Jupiter ones.
Same, exactly. I can completely relate to that. I met my current partner during a Saturn transit, and he's one of the best things that ever happened to me. So it's just that's why I like to do this work with going back to what's happened before and seeing what's possible for the future. But having said that, a good Jupiter transit is really an amazing experience. There's an expansion of what is possible, an exposure to new worlds, a sense of confidence and optimism and faith in the self. And challenging Jupiter transits, though, it's like eating too much sugar, having a hangover. There can be a sense of arrogance or pomposity, overextension, denial of negative realities, overconsumption, gambling, and just plain foolishness. So some of the herbs that I like to use to support Jupiter transits and kind of shape them in a good direction are agrimony, betony, borage, dandelion, fig, hyssop, lemon balm, meadowsweet, sage, and yellow dot. And those are all Jupiter associated herbs. Okay, so moving on to Saturn.
Look at these beautiful slides. They're just, ah.
Exactly, like polar opposites. So Jupiter magnifies everything so we can really see it, and then Saturn brings it back down, brings it in, contracts it so that we can get really serious about it and build a solid foundation. So this is my teacher, Stephen Forrest, another one of my longtime teachers. He's great with Saturn, and that's why I use his quotes, because he's a Saturn ruled guy, and when he talks about Saturn, I just really resonate with it.
Yeah, I'm a forester as well, so you are absolutely right.
Oh yeah, oh great, that's funny.
And I love that. I love this quote because I think about it a lot.
Yeah,
very Tauran. I have a very still energy, so I'm like, oh Saturn, I need help.
Absolutely. Yeah, I also think about these a lot. So practice, 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 and patience, patience, patience. You can either be depressed or exhausted. And that quote, when he's talking about that, he's talking about with Saturn, you need to have a project or something you can bite your teeth into. And Saturn literally rules the teeth, and really exhaust yourself in pursuit of something meaningful. Or if you don't go down that road, you can end up being depressed. So I really love that with Saturn. Okay, and also this quote from William Yeats that Stephen also brought to my attention, the fascination of what is difficult. So when you're having a Saturn transit, and although Saturn's complete cycle is about 28 and a half years, we have a Saturn transit to a planet or an angle every 7 years or so. So sometimes people will say, oh, my Saturn return's over. Am I done with Saturn? It's like, no.
No, you're like, I assure you, you're not.
But I like to remind people that, especially after your Saturn return, Saturn transits can actually be really comforting and in a way bring much more depth and resonance than Jupiter or some of the other transits. I come to appreciate the Saturn transits more. So nature, mountains, cliffs, rocks, and just a few positive Saturn words: focus, committed, persistent, that old soul feeling, integrity, resilience, excellent, long-lasting, enduring. And then challenging, as we all know, there can be that sense of depression or oppression, fear, frustrated, hopeless, feeling trapped, negative limits, authority issues, that Groundhog Day feeling, same thing happening again and again with no end in sight.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have definitely done some groundhogging, and I talk about it a lot on this channel because finally, at a point, I had to just go have a conversation with Saturn and say, okay, what are you actually trying to teach me? Because I have done this 3 times. It is the same thing. What do I need to see here? And things got different.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that idea of having a conversation with the planet, because that's really so much in alignment with how I work with the planets as living energies that you develop throughout your life, an ongoing relationship with. So anytime you're in a relationship with any living being, there's guidelines to that. So I love that idea of talking to the planet directly. Yeah. So some wonderful supportive herbs for Saturn are comfrey, hellebore, holly, horsetail, mullein, quince, shepherd's purse, and my favorite is Solomon's seal. Solomon's seal is really healing to the knees and the bones and the body. So that's a good one. I see a lot of times people when they're having Saturn transit, there will be issues with knees and musculoskeletal stuff that comes up. So I often recommend Solomon's seal with that.
I laugh because I was planning this last, as Saturn was coming towards Aquarius, I was like, okay, it's going to hit my 6th house. So let's just be prepared. And sure enough, the day that Saturn went into Aquarius, I had a tooth go rogue and it had to be removed. And as soon as Saturn hit its retrograde, it was fixed.
Oh my God, wow.
And I knew I was so ready. I was like, Saturn, okay. All right. Which one are you taking down? Because I get it. A limb is going to go.
Oh, wow. That's like the, magical astrology in action.
Yes, sure was. But the nice part is that I was like not afraid. I was like, I understand. There's something happening in here that we need to work out. And this is the means to get the lesson facilitated. So it was nice to go into it with that. And it was very Saturnian. A tooth that should have taken 3 days took 30.
Oh, wow.
30 days to get right. And in the meantime, all of these other things got to happen that wouldn't have happened without that. So
that is one of the powers of astrology, is having that awareness and that sense of consciousness around what is happening. So it's not, you're not lost in the dark, so to speak.
Yeah.
You've got your guide. All right, so Uranus. So Now, Uranus moves much more slowly. It's got an 84-year cycle. So, hopefully all of you watching this, all of us will live to have an Uranus return. But we don't have as many Uranus transits because of the slow pace. And I associate Uranus with the goddess Urania, and also the Santeria, Oya, she's goddess of lightning. And key words that go along with Uranus: lightning, activist, electricity, eccentric, scientist, individuality, quirkiness, connection to allies and humanity, progressive thoughts and ideas, genius, inventiveness. And of course, Uranus goes with lightning. In the body, I really associate it with the nervous system. And I love Uranus. My moon's in Aquarius. I have Uranus conjunct my Mercury and my ascendant. So I'm with those kind of lightning bolt changes. And I know not everybody feels the same way. But the positive experience of Uranus is life awakening changes, clearing away the old to make room for the new, and a defender or defending freedom and individuality. But a challenging Uranus transit can bring up that rebel without a cause, a sort of a refusal or inability to negotiate with any of society's rules, selfishness, unreliability, and irresponsibility.
Yeah, and my goodness, as we're experiencing Uranus in Taurus, you guys, I'm interested to hear how's that going for you, because I will tell you, as a Taurus, I feel shaken, not stirred, and there has been a lot going on for this little Taurus. And I was just having a meeting with David Cochran, and he's a Taurus as well. He's like a power Taurus, and like we are both just like it's like when lightning hits the earth is exactly what that's like. So you guys, what is your Uranus and Taurus transit going like? Let me know in the comment section.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely feeling it as well. And it really is interesting. I love that, lightning hitting the earth. It's like something that is so still and solid being shooken, the earthquakes and all kinds of shifts, for sure.
Absolutely. But it makes everything rise, right? That's what happens when you crack the earth open, from everything from the minerals to the jewels to that rich soil that's down there to the dead bodies and skeletons. It all comes up, because it is really time to have an awakening and a clearing of some things, So
Exactly.
It's like from jewels to dead bodies, we're doing it all.
Yes. And I like to think of Uranus as because I also do tarot with the tarot card of the Tower, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. It's like breaking away the old structures and illuminating the decay so that new life can blossom.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, well, it's happening.
So, and I'm just okay, sorry about that. I lost my, all right. So, because in traditional astrology, Uranus is one of the more modern planets, the herbs are the same as Saturn. Many of the ancient herbalist astrologers didn't know about Uranus, so they didn't assign herbs to it. I like to also put in some nervous system herbs like milky oats, just because it's really supportive to the nervous system. And I've been guzzling it lately.
Buy the gallons, put it in your camel pack, sip it on your walk.
Absolutely. All right. So next up, we've got Neptune. Neptune, ruled by Pisces. I associate it with both Poseidon and also Yamaya, the goddess of the ocean, and Santeria and the Yoruban tradition. And then keywords: ocean, film, photography, art, healing, music, bliss, spirit, one love, dreams, intuition, attunement with other realities, communication with plants and animals. In the body, it's associated with the lymphatic system because that's the fluid in the body. In nature, of course, the ocean. And positive Neptune transits awaken our compassion, our imagination, our sense of magic, connection to others on a heart and spirit level, connection to nature and animals. Just an example of this personally, when I was having recently, I had Neptune square Mars, and it was Neptune in my 6th house, square Mars in my 3rd. I was really concerned that I'd get sick, or I'd come up with some unidentifiable mysterious disease. And what actually ended up happening is, over the 2 or 3 years I had the transit, I went to herb school, immersed myself in the world of plant communication, just letting the plants move me and shape my energy. So it was a really different and much more positive experience than my sort of Mercury and Virgo catastrophizing mind went to.
Absolutely. I know it's funny. I always watch when because I'm Pisces on the descendant. Whenever there's an interaction from transiting Neptune or Neptune in my chart in general, I pay attention really to like what's going on in my relationships and my connections. And a lot of times I pull in some really cool soul friends, or people who really do reshape my Neptune. Like you said, like they reshape that ideal or even that energy that I carry in a certain way. So it can be really great. Now I've had some other ones where I just get weird and I am just like delusional and weird.
Totally can understand that. And that is, some of the challenging sides of Neptune transit. There can be a sense of confusion or laziness, spaciness, addiction, escapism, drifting, or like glamorous delusions, where we kind of think things are going to be a little bit more amazing than they end up being.
Which is it's just funny because I remember I was in college and I think I was in my first like year or so, sometime in that early first couple years, and transiting Mars came right over my Neptune, and I met this person and he was just so in love. He's like, oh my God. And I was like, let me just tell you, give this like 2 weeks and I am a glamorous delusion to you. And I knew it, like at a heart level. I'm like, no, something is happening for you, but I am a glamorous delusion to you. And it really did. It only took like 2 or 3 weeks. And he's like, bah, whatever, and moved on. And I was like, yes, this is that.
That's Neptune in action for sure, in the more challenging sense. And it's so amazing to me because when I've had those kinds of experiences with Neptune and love relationships, it just seems so real.
Yeah.
And and then that time passes and it's like, what was I thinking?
I do know. Okay. All right. Herbs. Oh, you've got agrimony here as well.
Yes, and again, because Neptune is one of the modern planets, the herbs are the same. I like to put in here, though, just in terms of flower essences, one of the sort of constitutional flower essences that I recommend to anybody with strong Neptune in their chart or having Neptune transits or a lot of Pisces is pink yarrow flower essence, because it's really good for when you're like that absorbent sponge and just energetically and emotionally soaking up, everybody's stuff. It kind of gives you a nice little boundary and container so that you've got some space for yourself in there. So that's not on here, but just for folks who are watching who are interested in that.
Brilliant.
Okay. All right. Finally, we've got the powerhouse Pluto. And Pluto rules Scorpio. It will never, unless life cycles dramatically change in the next few years, we will never have a Pluto return, but we will experience some Pluto transit somewhere in our lives.
Yeah, I'm just doing the old Pluto square, which is so funny because it can be catastrophized as well, more so than anything. I'm like, no, I think it's, for me, pushed a lot more energy for me to heal and to shift.
That's interesting. And are you at the beginning, in the middle, or towards the end of that transit?
Let's see. So I am 39 and Pluto is, so I must be right in the kind of beginning, middle-ish of it right there.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about my Pluto.
I mean, that is definitely one of those initiatory transits. And I remember when I had that, it was really profound for me. I mean, it can be painful, but it's so, at the other end of it, you really have a sense, I believe, at least in my experience, of your own power. And yeah, it's a special transit for sure.
Yeah, so big ups to everybody going through the Pluto square right now. We're gonna come out revolutionized, changed, regenerated. I'm really excited for us. So hang in there.
Yes. And one thing about those generational transits, everybody in your age group right now is experiencing that. So you're not alone, right?
Right.
You've got the collective, you got your community, your tribe kind of with you in that one.
Absolutely. And I do feel like the Pluto Libra gen has really been called to the table in this last year, where it's like, hey, we have some gaps to bridge. We have a lot of generations on this planet at the same time. Get up here and start helping.
Absolutely. And I love it that here you are, Pluto and Libra, having your Pluto square surrounded by all your art and your color. I mean, I really feel like that is part of what the Pluto and Libra generation has to bring to the table right now, is transforming all this shifts and change into a sense of justice, peace, beauty, art, creativity. So can't wait to see what y'all come up with.
Guys, we're on.
All right, so God and goddesses, Hades, Persephone, Inanna, Kali. These are the Mayan ones I can't say very well, but Mixtecahuatl, and those are the god and goddess of the underworld and of death. And keywords for Pluto: power, depth, intensity, all things underground, precious metals, stones, rocks, coal, oversees birth, death, and rebirth, and sexuality. So during Pluto transits, I like to remind clients that you are diving deep beneath the surface to seek your treasure, the treasure of your power. And so that to me just really resonates with Pluto themes. In the body, it's the reproductive and elimination system, and in nature, underground caves and also volcanoes. Positive Pluto transits, there can be an intense emotional and energetic healing potential, a right use of power, positive, transformative, revolutionary change and regeneration, and positive use of sexual energy and healing. But challenging Pluto transit, you can feel like you're being swallowed by the shadow and spit out again. There's obsession, cruelty, control over others, or feeling under control of others, rigidity, revenge, rape, murder, and violence. So Pluto transits can get pretty intense on the more challenging side.
Yeah. And I tend to find that when a planet comes into trine aspect with my Pluto, those are the harder ones, because it's almost like it just lets the ease of whatever's coming, transpire. I feel like when my Pluto is hit by square or opposition, I get more clarity, which I think is, speaks to something else in my chart as well. But it's just interesting. I would love to know with you guys out there, how does it feel when your Pluto has an interaction? Let me know.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to me to see in people's charts when they're having Pluto transit, it really does seem to be based on what kind of relationship their natal Pluto is having to that planet. So, if you've got a natal Pluto trine Venus, when you're having a transit from Pluto to Venus, a lot of times that experience seems to be a little bit more smooth than if you've got a natal square. It can be more rocky. Okay, so we're going to go back to the Mars herbs for Pluto, and because the ancient ruler of Mars, or Scorpio, is Mars, so we associate Pluto and Mars together in a lot of ways. And these are all, I'm not going to read them all because there's a lot of them, but these are all the herbs that you could use to support Pluto. Okay, so let's get into Maya Angelou. And before I talk about her history and her chart, I just want to say, in terms of how I do this, when I'm looking at a famous person's chart, I will first choose a planet that I want to focus on. And then I'll go back through the ephemeris in their lifespan, and I'll identify, excuse me, certain times that they were having significant transit. And then once I do that, I'm going to look up their biography and find situations or themes in their life that seem to resonate with that transit. So this is kind of an outline. I was looking at Saturn with Maya Angelou. And what I want to highlight here is that in 1936, when she was about 8 years old, she had Saturn conjunct both Mercury and Venus. So looking at her chart here, you can see she's got that really profoundly intuitive, almost psychic Venus-Mercury conjunction in Pisces in the 8th house. And in 1936, Saturn was by conjunction in her, traveling through her 8th house over that really profound aspect that she has in her natal chart. A few years later, Saturn moved forward out of her 8th into her 9th to conjunct both her Sun and Jupiter in Aries in the 9th. So she's got that, warrior spirit, really able to tap into her true inner fire and express herself in the world. And then the next time around, 30 years later, when she had a returning cycle of Saturn to the same place, and this is where the astrological archaeology comes in, we're looking at the identical transit from 30 years after the first initial transit when she was so young. So again, 1966, Saturn conjunct Mercury and Venus, and 1969, Saturn conjunct Sun and Jupiter.
Ooh, and what happened?
Is that right? So what happened? Let's take a look at that. So her real life experience. And so in 1936, I don't want to set off any kind of trigger emotions in people. So I encourage you, if you're not familiar with her life story, to read some of her books, read her autobiography, and you can get more of the details of what she went through during that time. But suffice to say that she experienced some pretty severe trauma and abuse in 1936 that was related to her voice. At that time, she stopped speaking, literally. So Saturn came along and shut her voice down.
And that's that Mercury Venus.
Sorry, go ahead.
And that's that Mercury Venus.
And that was a Mercury Venus conjunction. And I just want to, I don't know if we didn't mention at the beginning of this, I'm profoundly hard of hearing and had a hearing loss since I was young. And so I depend on closed captions to communicate when I do this kind of meeting. So I cut you off, and part of it is just, I'm reading the captions. I hear your voice, but I'm depending on the captions. So I just wanted to let people know that. So
God bless technology, right?
Exactly. It's been really, really helpful. Okay, so in 1939, when she had that Saturn on her Sun and Jupiter, she was exposed by her early teachers to writers that really strongly influenced her later work and writing.
Yeah, so we see under that Jupiterian energy, it's activated, and it's her Jupiter. So there's some sense of her expansion out, or some influence that would allow or call her Jupiter to kind of come out of its shell. And with the Sun there, it's a life force moment that happens.
Exactly. And she also, because Jupiter and Saturn both ruled teachers, she was from the outside world. Teachers came in who shaped her experience of expansion and growth and another world, is possible kind of thing.
Yeah, wow.
So 30 years later, in 1966, she was dealing with the aftermath of the death of Malcolm X. And she really went, because of that, she was very close to Malcolm X, very supportive of him. And very involved in his work, and his death brought a need for retreat and turning inwards. And during that time, when she was diving deep within, she began to create a lot. She began to sing, she was writing plays, she was acting. So I just find it fascinating that the first time around when she was a child and she didn't have control or the ability to protect herself, because it was, adults impacting her. This next time around when she was in her own authority and she really worked it, she turned it into a creative process. And out of that creative process, 1969, when Saturn went over her sun in Jupiter, she published her, one of her most famous books, The Caged Bird Sings.
Mm. Mm. It's interesting too, because I think in part of her story in 1936, there is a very big emphasis on a male connection and a male energy that creates a lot of that inward. And in 66, we see the same kind of, it's another significant male energy in her life, which creates the going in. And then each time it's influenced and brought out and out and out as we see it with that sun Jupiter. So it's really fascinating how this happens for her. And we have this as well.
Yes, I love that you brought that up with the male influence, because that is that sense of Saturn kind of coming onto her very sensitive Piscean, intuition and just kind of channeling, from spirit that she brought into her work. And there was like a container, both good and bad, that limited and then helped to shape it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, very cool.
Yeah. So I think, let's see, I'm trying to just figure out where we are on time.
So we've got just a few, I'm going to cut this part out, but we've got just a few minutes. So let's maybe go to the technique and the other things that you had.
Okay, great. So we will skip through Grandma Moses and skip through Will Rogers. And okay, so if you want to do this for yourself, what I would suggest, this is my process for doing this when I do it for myself or I do it for a client, is to first choose a transiting planet. And again, if you're under the age of like 30, you're probably going to want to stick with Jupiter, because you may not have had many of the other outer planet transits. You probably have had a Saturn transit or two, so Saturn can also be one to work with, but I would try starting with Jupiter. Once you've got your transiting planet that you've decided to work with, you're going to take a look and see what natal planet is that transiting planet affecting. So are you having Jupiter conjunct your sun, Saturn opposing your moon, Uranus conjunct Mercury? You want to figure out what the exact transit is. Then you're going to excavate and reflect. So I always like to say, you could do a little meditation with yourself before you do this, where you just imagine yourself kind of going down into an archaeological dig site and picking up your tools and brushing off the dust, from the artifact of your transit, and beginning to explore the meaning of what is it that you're looking at and what kind of meaning does that have in your life. So I have some writing prompts for people. Once you've identified the transit and you've looked at it in the past, and then you've looked at it currently and maybe identified the timeline of it. So Saturn transits are always going to take about the same amount of time to affect your chart. So just looking at, okay, where am I at now in this current Saturn transit? Am I in the first pass of it? Am I in the middle, or am I coming out of it? And reflect on what's happening for you. So you may want to look at this for what was happening in the past. What happened for you the last time you had this transit? And what themes from that time align with the archetypal meaning of the planet that we explored a little bit earlier? Did you know that you were having that transit at that time? Sometimes these previous transits, we weren't interested or aware of astrology, and so you were just kind of moving through it. You didn't have that light, to guide you through. And at that time, how did you choose to embrace or not, or integrate the planetary medicine.
Yeah.
Okay. So then for the current transit, looking at what's happening for you right now, how is this showing up in the people in your life? Like you were talking about, Stormie, had a person show up during a Mars Neptune experience.
That poor person, I was like, oh no, I'm not what you're thinking. I promise.
Right. So transits can show up through people, they can show up through projects, they can show up just as an internal awareness or shift or change. There's all different ways that they manifest. Or what do you anticipate for happening in the future around this transit? And what themes align with the archetypal meaning? And then finally, how can you rewrite your story of this planetary influence to embrace or integrate the planetary medicine? So if the last time you had Saturn conjunct Venus, you had a very painful breakup and you're headed towards a Saturn Venus conjunction again, and you're afraid you're going to have a breakup, how can you reframe or rewrite the story so that instead of a painful ending to a relationship, maybe it's a consolidation and a recommitment? Maybe you get married again to your same partner. There's a lot of different ways this transit can be shaped in the current time.
That is exactly what I had to do. I realized I was like, okay, so it looks like I get married like every 7 years. And so I told my husband, I was like, I can't keep marrying new people. We're going to have to just get remarried so I can fit the bill and then learn the rest of the lessons. So he's on board.
I love that. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to get remarried again.
Yes, absolutely. I was like, gotta keep up with the pattern, okay?
That's awesome. I think that's such a creative and beautiful way to work with the energies of the transit of Saturn in particular. Okay, so here we come to our magical action, and this I have a background in paganism, witchcraft, and so I really like to do some kind of tangible, Virgo style, physical, but magical manifestation of working with the transit. So the one I have to offer for you today for this upcoming new moon in Leo, which should be a really beautiful and special new moon, is to, from the writing that you've done, hopefully, you choose one intention about a current transit or one that's coming up. And every day, starting after this new moon, you spend about 3 minutes focusing on this intention. You could just write it down, a couple times. You could draw it if you're artistic, paint it. You could dance it if you're more physical. You can, while you're cooking, you can whisper it into your stirring, bring it into your food. You can sculpt it, you can speak it out loud, whatever comes to you, but just having that mindfulness and that focus of setting an intention around the transit so that you can bring your own power and free will to the shifting tides of the planet.
Yeah, that's going to be beautiful, especially with the new moon in Leo coming up in just a couple of weeks. This is a wonderful time to not only plant your seeds of intention, but then to kind of take this technique into it as well. Come back to the intention, make sure that you're connecting to it so you can move it forward.
Yeah, and using just Leo's is a sign of creativity and self-expression and playfulness. So I really like to encourage and invite people to have fun with it and use and express it and create it in your own way.
Absolutely. Very Leo.
All right, so that's what I got for you.
That's a ton.
If you don't have an ephemeris already, this is the ephemeris that I use. Besides, there's one available online. Astro.com is a great online resource. And then I offer a mentorship program for budding astrologers, and that's my website.
Absolutely. And you guys, as always, I will make sure that Fern's information, her website, all of that good stuff is below this video. So you can just click down below and go check her out and go and visit and see what Fern's getting into, because there's a lot of goodness. You've got like a lot of good stuff to dip into and knowledge to share over there, from flowers to stars to everything in between. So you're quite the resource, and I really appreciate you putting yourself out here for all of us.
Thank you so much, Stormie, for making this space for everyone in the astrological community to come together like this. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a good time, man. We're just meeting people from all over the world. So, Fern, you're absolutely welcome back anytime you would like to. So you just let me know and we'll have you back over.
All right, thank you so much, Stormie, and I will see you later.
Okay, you guys, we will see you guys next time. And hopefully in this last hour we were together, we gave you something that is worth the time that you took to show up. And I most certainly think that we did. Make sure you click in the description box down below, get all of Fern's information. Plus, make sure you get the information from the syllabus to the YouTube Academy. Right now, as you're watching this video, we are on a little bit of a summer break, so you have time to catch up on coursework and classes that maybe you have missed. So make sure that you check it out. All right, you guys, I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.